And we have another person just signing in, so hold on one second. Okay. Hi, Jill. Welcome to the meeting. Okay. Go ahead, Erica. Take control.
I'm actually going to let Matt start out, and then I'll talk about the project specifics with the alternative. But okay. Matt, over to you.
All right. So can you all see my screen?
Not yet. Oh, no. It's still mine.
So open share tray.
Share your tray.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Now, can you see it?
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. Jump forward here. So yeah, my name is Matt Edge. As I mentioned before, I'm the project manager for Sierra Dev Engineering Group for this project. Before I get started, I want to let you know that all these slides will be available on the project website too. So if you see one that you wanted to take another look at, or if something's too small on your screen, you can go to the website. It should be up by tomorrow, and you can select these figures and this presentation and then look at it in more detail. So our project is on Lois Drive and West 32nd Avenue. I think hopefully everybody knows this, but I will just go through it anyways. It extends on Lois Drive from Benson Boulevard down to West 32nd Avenue, and on West 32nd Avenue from Lois Drive over to Minnesota Drive. So we are currently preparing the draft design study report for the project, and that's really the detailed look at all the issues and challenges that are on the corridor, and where we develop alternatives for addressing the issues and what we want to build along the roadway. So, so as we progress, we'll submit the draft design study report with a recommended alternative to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their review and approval. There'll be a public hearing associated with that. Once we receive comments from them, we'll move forward to the final design study report with a recommended alternative. That report will be used to prepare the design, and then which would go forward into construction. There is not any funding currently for design or construction, so once we have the final design study report done, the project will sit until they can get a little bit more funding. So the project, what's the purpose and its need? Really, the purpose driving the project is to improve non-motorized connectivity on both Lois Drive and West 32nd Avenue. We need the project because there's a lot of pedestrian and bicycle traffic along the corridor, and the non-motorized facilities are missing, discontinuous, and they're falling apart. And you look at the roadway and drainage systems, they're also in poor condition. Lois Drive was listed as the Spenard Community Council's highest priority capital project for 2019, so we're trying to take that forward. So project area is really a lot going on. Lois Drive is much different than West 32nd Avenue. In fact, we've got quite a bit more right-of-way. We have 60 to 65 feet of right-of-way on Lois Drive, mostly 60, but a few places of 65 feet. And we have 60 to 30 feet of right-of-way on West 32nd Avenue. So down by the Anchorage Sands apartment in Minnesota Drive, we have only 30 feet of right-of-way. If you think about a road corridor with 2 traffic lanes at 12 feet wide, curb and gutter at 2 feet wide per side, that's 28 feet right there. So 30 feet is just not a lot of room to put anything into as far as roadway goes. Our speed limit on both the roads is 25 miles an hour. So Lois Drive has got quite a bit more traffic than 32nd Avenue. We have 2,870 vehicles counted on Lois Drive, while only had 1,060 on 32nd. And it's interesting, it's really directionally skewed in heading westbound on 32nd Avenue and northbound on Lois Drive. I'm not sure if that's that's because of cut-through traffic or if that's being driven by the school, but definitely interesting. A lot more traffic going west and north. And so the 85th percentile speeds on Lois Drive are 29 to 30 miles an hour. 85th percentile speed just means that 85% of the drivers are going less than that speed along the roadway. And on 32nd Avenue, it's only 24 miles an hour. So neither of this is a little bit, Lois Drive's a little bit higher speed, but it's really not quite to the level that would warrant traffic calming. And then 32nd Avenue is definitely below the speed limit, so it's not a candidate for traffic calming. Some of these photos, it may be a little bit hard to see on your screen, but just some of the issues that we have along the corridor: mailboxes adjacent to the roadway, some of the driveway and drainage issues, poor road conditions, some traffic issues associated with the intersection of 32nd and Lois. One of the big challenges we have is this overhead utility line that runs right down the center of the right-of-way on West 32nd Avenue. It's got both transmission and distribution lines on it, and it would be extraordinarily expensive if we have to relocate that system. Other issues, just we have pedestrian crossings to the school, but we don't have any pedestrian facilities on either side at this location. We have some more drainage issues and parking and queuing associated with the Aquarian Charter School. And again, some more drainage issues and then some very limited right-of-way along the section of roadway in front of Aquarian Charter School. So as part of the project, first thing we did back in 2019 is develop a concept report. So that was ahead of the design study report. The concept report is really just we went out and asked members of the public what they felt were the issues on the roadway and what they'd like us to see solved if we move forward with the design. So part of that preparation, we sent out a couple mailers. We presented the project to the community council. We had a public open house back in November 2019. It included members of the general public and then business stakeholders, which I think primarily at that meeting, the Aquarian Charter School folks showed up, wanted to discuss the project. And we also met with various agencies. The agencies are really just different municipal agencies, state agencies, DOT, and then utility companies. So we met with fire and traffic and whatnot. And then we submitted the concept report to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they had that as a public hearing on April 6th of this year. So just before COVID was getting going, we had a meeting there. So what we heard when we were developing the concept report, these are just kind of the main items. There's actually a full list of the comments received in the concept report published on the project website, but this is just a summary of them. The real concern with the lack of pedestrian facilities. Folks wanted us to consider a one-way road on 32nd Avenue. Definitely some challenges with the parking and queuing at Aquarian Charter School. Some people felt like speeding was an issue, and others were concerned with the loss of landscaping. I think that's really focused on the area next to Aquarian Charter School. The same area, people were concerned with the lack of visibility from that thick vegetation. Then people pointed out drainage issues. Definitely a consensus that they'd like improvements extended Lois south of 32nd Avenue. And then people were concerned with the roadway surface conditions and sinkholes reported in at least 2 locations on 32nd Avenue. So the people seem to support adding street lighting, providing some drainage improvements, having continuous pedestrian facilities on the corridor, improving the roadway surface, and continuing to have on-street parking on 32nd Avenue. So those are the big items that we took away from the public input that people really wanted to see taken forward with our design and our alternatives. So from here, we just established a set of project goals and how we wanted to maybe develop the alternatives that we're presenting here tonight in the design study report. Our alternatives, we would like them to conform to Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, which establishes roadway features and amenities, requirements for sidewalks and whatnot, and the Municipality of Anchorage Design Criteria Manual, which also has some requirements in there for how you construct roadways. We'd like to incorporate complete streets and Vision Zero objectives wherever possible. Complete streets just means that we want to build a facility for everybody to be able to use. Whether or not you're biking or you're walking or you're driving along the roadway, we want to have something that works for everyone. Vision Zero is a objective that the municipality has adopted that really means we want to take non-motorized deaths and serious injuries on corridors down to zero. So we want to create a safe environment for everybody. And we want to address stakeholder input wherever possible. And just a couple of things that we weren't able to address that the stakeholders brought up is, two factors. One-way street on 32nd Avenue, we brought that up to the municipal traffic department. We weren't able to include that in this in these alternatives analysis because of the issues with when you establish a one-way street in one area, you have much higher traffic volumes going the other direction on another street that we may not intend. So really, it's going to take a study of the entire area and look at some one-way couplets with streets going in opposite directions to make that happen. So it takes a bigger project than what we have availability to do right now. The other thing we weren't able to address was to extend our improvements south of on Lois Drive, south of West 32nd Avenue. That was something that the community wanted. The challenge there is that there's only 30 feet of available right-of-way on Lois Drive once you get south of 32nd Avenue. So any improvements in that area is going to require significant right-of-way acquisition, and it was just outside of the scope of what we could do for this project. What we did evaluate is on both Lois and 32nd within the project area, evaluated roadway reconstruction and resurfacing, new curb and gutter and storm drain improvements, new sidewalks and pathways, new street lighting, new signage and landscaping, and utility relocation as required for the roadway construction. So again, based on our evaluation of the project corridor, we definitely identified some significant design challenges, and a bunch of these I've already mentioned. I'll go ahead and go through them again. So 30 feet of right-of-way is only available on the eastern end of 32nd Avenue at Minnesota Drive in front of Anchorage Sands Apartments. Again, 30 feet of right-of-way is only available on Lois Drive south of 32nd Avenue. And the challenging part of that is that it's not centered up on the right-of-way to the north. It's actually shifted to the western side of the right-of-way to the north. So any intersection improvements that we have there, we end up having to skew the improvements somewhere either on the north side or on the south side in order to match up the intersection. And then on 32nd Avenue, when you get west of Lois Drive, again, the right-of-way is condensed down to 30 feet. And that matches the southern edge of the right-of-way to the east. So we have to skew it not only north or east-west, but also north-south in order to get an intersection that works for both roadways. I mentioned this earlier, but we have that electrical transmission and distribution poles on the middle of West 32nd Avenue right-of-way. Those will be very, very expensive if we have to try to relocate them. And then we have a lot of on-street parking use at Aquarian Charter School during drop-off and pickup times. All those trying to balance all those issues with the alternatives that we've developed. So I'll let Erica actually talk about the specific alternatives, but I wanted to point out before she jumps in that the alternatives are a bit mix and match. So alternative 1 for Lois might go with alternative 3 for 32nd Avenue, or alternative 2 for one road could go with alternative 4. And the same thing with the intersections. We can mix these up a bit to try to get the best improvements for each for the entire project corridor, so that we can balance the impacts and get a great project moving forward. So Erica, I'll let you take over from here.
Okay, let me take over. All right, thank you. So like Matt mentioned, we come up with 4 alternatives that we evaluated further in terms of the analysis and their impacts. Let me advance to where I didn't advance my slides yet. There we go. Alternative 1 is fully compliant with the Municipal Code Title 21 as well as the Design Criteria Manual, which includes specifically 7 feet wide snow storage buffers behind the curb. And I have pictures of all these coming up next, so you don't have to look at all the text too long. Alternative 2 narrows those buffers to keep the cross-section within the available public right-of-way. Alternative 3 removes the buffers and shifts the roadway to minimize impacts to adjacent properties, utility, and other features. Alternative 4 is a pathway-only alternative. It really minimizes the impact and reduces the construction costs. For the intersection of Lois and 32nd, we developed 3 alternatives. 2 of them shift it to line up the right-of-way on either side, and then the third one looks at a roundabout. And like Matt mentioned, these can be mixed and matched, so we'll go through quite a few of them, each dependent on the roadway. For Lois Drive, Alternative 1, like I mentioned, this one includes the full 7-foot buffers between the back of curb and the sidewalk. This is looking north on Lois. So on the Aquarian Charter School side, you would have a 10-foot pathway, and then on the west side, you'd have a 5-foot sidewalk. You have 11-foot drive lanes and 3.5-foot shoulders. You'd also have street lighting. This does require right-of-way acquisition. As you can see, we have 60 to 65 feet of right-of-way, but our improvements go for, whoops, I can't draw straight, a full 70 feet. So this would require right-of-way acquisition for the full length of the corridor. It does meet all Title 21 code requirements as well as design criteria requirements. So it would not require any variances or waivers. Here's a plan view of Alternative 1. Again, here's the section we're talking about, and this section is like we're looking that way. So again, the pathway right here is right here. The sidewalk here is over here. Oh, I'm sorry, there is somebody just on the phone. Were you able, I hope you're able to get the presentation materials. Pathways on the right side if you're looking north, sidewalks on the left side if you're looking north. This has the 7-foot snow storage buffers between the sidewalk and the pathway on both sides, 2 travel lanes with the shoulders, as well as right-of-way acquisition that's required the whole way, like I said. Items that are impacted with this construction, for example, a fire hydrant would have to be relocated. This would also include new storm drain improvements as well. For ease of presentation, both for this presentation as well as the design study report, we did combine alternatives graphically. So for example, this Alternative 1 for Lois Drive, I'm also showing intersection Alternative 1. And I'm going to change my pointer color to kind of point out what Matt was talking about with the right-of-way lines. The right-of-way line is here and here on the northwest side, and on the northeast side, it's here and here. On the southeast side, it's here to here, and on the southwest side, it's here to here. So you can see they don't line up, nor are they the same width. So that was one of the big challenges that we were looking at for the intersection alternatives. So Alternative 1, as you can see, it lines up the roadway on the west and south sides, which means we have to jog it, shift it on both the north and the east sides. Thus, this alternative intersection would require full acquisition of this parcel as well as this parcel, just because of the improvements and the impacts. Another big factor with this one is that the transmission pole is located right there. And in the design study concept report process, we did reach out to ML&P asking them about that. This project is not currently in their undergrounding plan. We did reach out to them, but they did not indicate that they have plans to progress that further and do it in conjunction with this project. So that was a factor that we did look at, was trying to avoid those. The transmission poles are the really, really tall ones, and the distribution poles are the smaller ones. The transmission poles are significantly more expensive to relocate than the distribution poles. So some of our alternatives include not relocating the transmission poles. Another thing to note is the improvements stop at Benson Boulevard, and we do not change the configuration of the intersection at Benson Boulevard. Alternative 2 for Lois is the exact same as Alternative 1, except for the snow storage buffers between the pathway and sidewalk and the back of curb. They're reduced to 4.5 feet. This allows the improvements to fit within the available right-of-way. We have 60 to 65 feet, and as you can see, our improvements fit within that. This, however, is not compliant with the MOA design criteria manual, and thus would need a variance. It is compliant with Title 21, which does not actually specify the buffer width, just a separation. It includes lighting as well as storm drain improvements, 11-foot travel lanes, and shoulders. Alternative 2, again, this section down here is like we are looking north. Exact same as alternative 1, just reduced buffers in these areas here and here. Again, infrastructure that is impacted by the improvements, say a fire hydrant or a light pole, or even like the sign from Minnesota Commons, would be relocated and placed outside of the improvements. Shown with this graphically for ease of representation is intersection alternative 2. This one, unlike alternative 1, matched the north and the east sides, which means we shift on the west and the south sides. This one, though, because of the location of the roadway, we're able to save the transmission pole. We put it in a little median in between the travel lanes, which is not ideal. You don't like a tall, expensive transmission pole located between travel lanes, but it does prevent it from requiring relocation. This intersection alternative would be able to keep this parcel, but would require full acquisition of this parcel based on the improvements at the intersection. For the roadway, because we're able to fit within the available right-of-way, there'd be very minimal impacts to adjacent properties in terms of acquisition requirements. Alternative 3 is very similar to the other two in terms of lane widths and shoulders, although it does remove the buffer on the pathway side. You can see these are attached. It keeps a 3-foot buffer on the west side, and that is actually just to accommodate mailboxes that are located over there. It includes street lighting and storm drain improvements as well, but it does not meet either Title 21 or the Design Criteria Manual and require variance to both of those. However, because it is the narrow section, it does not require right-of-way acquisition for the roadway. All 3, for reference, here's the section, and we are looking north. You can see there's a little buffer right there, but again, anything that is impacted with the project, fire hydrants, signs, etc., would require relocation and adjustment with the project. For ease of representation, again, these can be mixed and matched, but just to show you guys some visual representation, alternative 3, we are showing with it intersection alt 3, which is a roundabout. The roundabout, a couple of the goals we had with the roundabout was reducing and minimizing property impacts, because the other 2 alternatives, intersection alternatives, both required full acquisition.
Hold on one second, Erica. Jack, can you mute yourself, please? Or
Sorry about that.
that's okay. Thank you. Or I can mute you. Actually, I don't think I can. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Erica.
Okay. Roundabout, because we had a little more room to play with, and the other 2 alternatives both required full right-of-way acquisitions of properties, we played with the location of the roundabout to try to avoid that and see if we could get an alternative that did not require full acquisition. While Aquarian Charter School, obviously, I'm assuming, enjoys its land, it is not developed and does not contain people's homes. So you can see we pushed the intersection to the northeast. In that respect, we were able to save both parcels and avoid full acquisition of them. As you can see, though, moving the intersection to the northeast shifted these 2 roads to become a T intersection with 32nd Teen into Lois, and then you have a 3-leg roundabout. Our traffic analysis indicates that this would function adequately and perfectly acceptably based on the configuration, location, and traffic volumes. That is intersection alt 3. Now we'll move to alternative 4. Alternative 4, our goal with alternative 4 was to minimize impacts, minimize construction costs, but still meet some of the goals of the project. This one only constructs a pathway. The existing configuration, drive lanes, buffers, etc., are maintained as is. A pathway is constructed on the east side. We would also add pathway lighting, though, to enhance both pedestrian safety and comfort. It does not require right-of-way acquisition because, well, we placed the pathway so that we wouldn't need to. Here's a plan view, and as you can see, the pathway is here, is right there, and this is looking north. The pathway jogs and meanders a little bit, and this is intended to preserve its existing infrastructure. For example, the storm drain manhole there. The Minnesota Commons condominium sign is right there. There's a light pole there and a light pole there and a storm drain manhole there. So this one really did aim to minimize construction and impacts, but provide an amenity that is not currently available along the roadway. We're on to 32nd. As a reminder, this one has 60 feet of right-of-way on the west end, but only 30 feet on the east end. So the 60 feet you see right here is not accurate the whole way across, but the impacts, I'll show you what those look like. Another factor with 32nd is, of course, the large transmission poles. So we came up with various alternatives that impacted transmission poles and distribution poles only, and then none. Alternative 1 is the alternative that is fully compliant with Title 21 and the Design Criteria Manual. It would require a lot of right-of-way acquisition in both the 60-foot area as well as the 30-foot area. And that is because we had to add a couple of things, such as the curbed median in the center to accommodate the transmission poles. 32nd Avenue, as Matt mentioned earlier, is a local road which has less traffic than Lois, which is classified as a collector road. Local roadways, you can provide an on-street parking. So for alternative 1, we went ahead and showed what that would look like. So on the north side, the Aquarian Charter School side, we have a 7-foot parking lane. We provide the full buffers, 7 feet on both the north and the south side, as well as a 10-foot pathway and then a 5-foot sidewalk. As you can see just from this graphically, before we go to the plan view, it has quite a few impacts to adjacent properties. Here is what the plan view looks like for alternative 1. Again, here's our section, and we are looking east. So for example, the 5-foot sidewalk is on the south side right there. This has the full 7-foot buffers, the parking lane, the travel lanes, the shoulders, the pathway, the sidewalk, street lighting. This has everything, meets all codes. The curbed medians would be located only at the transmission poles. As a reminder, those are the ones that are super expensive to relocate. Distribution poles cost money to relocate, but they're not as expensive as the transmission poles. So the curbed medians are located only at the transmission poles. The distribution poles would still need to be relocated. This alternative would require full acquisition, would require right-of-way along the full corridor, as you can see here, but it would also require full acquisition of this parcel right here next to Wyoming Drive, and not full acquisition of the parcel, but full acquisition of the first row of buildings for the Anchorage Sands apartments, which would also be, with full acquisition comes relocation. So those would go into that one. The other thing to note on this is because the roadway, let me switch my color so I can show you the right-of-way line. I want to point out the right-of-way line on the north side is right here, and on the south side is right here. The right-of-way does not jog like that. But next to Anchorage Sands, what we're talking about with the 30 feet of right-of-way is it actually comes and goes like this, and before it goes north. So you can see we're reduced to 30 feet of right-of-way in front of Anchorage Sands. So anything that we do that includes full roadway reconstruction is going to impact it with this alternative. So as I go forward, you'll see the alternatives that we looked at that can avoid that because, well, we wanted to look at all our options. So as we are moving forward, this alternative does impact Anchorage Sands apartment, requires some acquisition of the buildings, and because we've shifted the roadway center line, we had to make some adjustments to the median on Minnesota Drive so that this now lines up. Alternative 2 aims to reduce the impacts but still meet the full roadway requirements in terms of drive lanes, parking lanes, pedestrian facilities. The way we were able to reduce the impact was get rid of the buffers between the back of curb and the pedestrian facilities. We're still providing a parking lane, drive lanes, a shoulder when there's no parking lane, roadway lighting, storm drain improvements, etc. We also aimed with this one to keep the transmission poles and the distribution poles, I'll show you that on the next slide, through the use of a curbed median in the center. So again, here's our section, and we are looking east. So the sidewalk is on the south side. The curbed median, as you can see, runs the majority of the roadway. Where there isn't a curbed median, we'd put dashed yellow lines. Similar to alternative 1, we'd put the dashed or the no parking yellow lines. We would obviously coordinate this with traffic if this should be located across an intersection, but this is for visual representation of where the median is versus where the median is not. We would still have a break in the median for northbound lefts into Aquarian Charter School. This one would also require adjustment at Minnesota for that. This, because we have reduced the impacts, would not require acquisition of this parcel, but because we only have 30 feet of right of way, we still would impact this first row of buildings for Anchorage Sands apartments. Alternative 3 for 32nd, we split into 3A and 3B. 3A is the west end. This
is now exiting.
This is the west end in front of Anchorage, in front of Aquarian Charter School. For this one, we put the pathway on the north side next to the school. We have a 7-foot buffer to accommodate the transmission poles as well as lighting improvements. We reduced the drive lanes and the shoulders in order to reduce the impacts. This would not meet either Title 21 or the Design Criteria Manual and would require variances to those. 3B is on the east end near Anchorage Sands apartment. We moved the pathway to the south side, kept the narrow drive lanes and shoulders, as well as existing transmission poles and street lights. So 3A, this one over here with the pathway on the north side, is right there. Both of these things are looking north. 3B with the pathway on the south side, pathway's over there. The transmission poles and distribution poles would be located in the buffer between the back of curb and the pathway in order to preserve them and not require relocation. When the pathway switches from the north side to the south side, it would be via a marked crosswalk in order to provide a safe place for pedestrians to cross. This one does not impact the Anchorage Sands buildings. As you can see, we've avoided them and kept the improvements almost within the right of way. We'd have minimal impacts there. However, now that the pathway is on the south side, you can see we've impacted this parcel over here, which would require full acquisition because most people don't want pathways going through their houses. Alternative 4, this is again the pathway only, minimized construction cost, improvements, and impacts to adjacent structures, utilities, property, etc. We also split into 4A and 4B. 4A is the west end in front of Aquarian Charter School, and then 4B, the next slide, will be next to Anchorage Sands on the east side. Pathway is on the north side for 4A. Everything else is kept the same. The drive lanes, the shoulders, the buffers, we don't touch those. All we're going to add is a pathway and pedestrian lighting for alternative 4. For B, we were just going to add a pathway and pedestrian lighting similar to 4A. However, we don't have an existing buffer between the between the pavement and the pathway. So in order to provide some separation for pedestrians between the pathway and between the pedestrian area and the vehicle area, we are going to add curb in order to accommodate that separation and really enhance the difference and differentiate between the two uses. Here we are looking again, the pathway is on the north side right here. Pathway is on the south side over here. Again, these are looking east. We would not impact, as you can see, the transmission poles are right here. The roadway, we don't impact any of the roadway or infrastructure over here. We still provide a marked crosswalk for a safe way for pedestrians to cross the vehicle travel lanes. And this is where we start adding the curb. So you can see we've got curb along the roadway here, again, to provide that separation. Again, unfortunately, because this does install a pathway and the goal of alternative 4 was to actually avoid Anchorage Sands apartments. You can see the different alternatives had different goals on what their impacts were. This one does impact, again, this parcel. One thing to note on alternatives 3 and 4 for 32nd is we list the pathway as 8 to 10 feet. This would be based on right-of-way impacts. Preliminary analysis shows that the difference of impacts between the two is minimal, and you could accommodate a 10-foot. However, we would need to finalize that and verify it in design. And if the impacts were substantially different, then the 8-foot pathway would be selected. Next steps is we will incorporate all the stakeholder comments received to date through the concept report, the first open house, the public open houses, the stakeholder open houses and business meetings. We will identify a preferred alternative. That's what the DSR's intent is to do, is to analyze all the alternatives and actually identify a preferred one. We will then present the draft design study report to both MOA Planning and Zoning Commission as a public hearing. The reason it's a public hearing is because we do anticipate that we will be requesting variances. Following that, we will incorporate comments from the municipality's review as well as Planning and Zoning Commission's review into a final design study report and route that for signatures and approval by Municipality of Anchorage, Project Management and Engineering and Traffic departments. Like Matt mentioned earlier, the design is not currently funded. Once that is funded, we will move forward to implement the preferred alternative identified in the design study report and move forward with the 65% and 95% designs, as well as continue our public involvement process, which includes public meetings. I'll now hand it back to Holly, who will tell you a little bit about how to stay involved and submit questions, and then I will be available to answer questions as well.
Okay, so I know that you're seeing Matt and Erica real big right now. I just want to show you one thing. There were 2 questions that came up during the chat, and I'm gonna ask those for Natalie and Representative Drummond. But if you want to get in the queue to speak, whoever you are, do you see this little tool down here? You can raise your hand. And it shows me over here. And so if you want to get in the queue to make a comment or ask another question once we get through these first 2, please do that. And I will call on you and get ready to unmute and talk, okay? So Erica, why don't you take it back now so that I assume you're gonna have to scroll through the presentation. So for the project team, the first question, or it's kind of both a question and a comment, and you addressed it, but I just want to address it directly. Representative Drummond talked about, and now I actually don't know if you meant the transmission poles or the distribution poles, but she asked about just working more with utilities to fast track that. And I guess if you could respond to that comment or question first.
Yes, let me make sure I am not muted myself. Yeah, I'm good. Yes, we did reach out to them, but we will put that on our list to follow up again and see if they would have any interest in speeding that up to be constructed in conjunction with our project. So yes, I will put that on my list right now to make sure we follow up with that.
Okay, so then the second question came from Natalie on Lois, and I'm going to go and look at it. I know you talked about a couple of fire hydrants that may need to be moved based on different alternatives. Natalie lives on Lois in front of 2996, and I guess if you could address that question about that specific hydrant, if you have that in your mind where that is.
Yes, I did. Thank you. It looks like Natalie did respond. I did try to get that one included. As a refresher, yes, anything that is impacted would be relocated, and the alternatives for Lois do indicate that that would be impacted and thus would be relocated. Whether or not that can be relocated just along its current path versus being relocated off to the side, we would have to determine and work with AWU, but yes, if it's impacted, it's going to be relocated.
Okay. So I guess now I want to open, let me get my list up. Does anybody else have any questions or comments and questions about what you've heard today, or any comments that you want to share with the project team about the project? Okay. You are making this easy on them. Okay. Let me see. Okay, we have one question in the chat. Does the roundabout negate the need for moving utilities?
Oh, yes, good question. I forgot to highlight that in that slide. So let me go back to that slide. 30 second. Lois, there we go. That's a really great question. That was one of the other goals of the roundabout, so thank you for pointing that out. This does, let me get my fancy little pointer back. I love my little pen. One of the goals, in addition to saving these properties, was not relocating the transmission pole, which is located right there. So it is close, but we would protect it with bollards, as we would on all the alternatives that protect the transmission poles behind the curb. We would put protective bollards. So the roundabout does not require relocation of the transmission pole at this intersection.
Okay. Jill had a follow-up question about, I'll get to your comment to Representative Drummond. I'm just going to follow up with roundabouts here. Jill asks, how would the roundabout work with alternative 2?
That one would have to be looked at further in design. We did not analyze those. I'm assuming you mean roundabout with roadway alternative 2, correct? It would work. We just didn't show it that way. Perfect, thank you. Let me get to, it would totally work. We just didn't show it that way, just honestly for ease of graphic representation. But any of these intersections can be interchanged with any of the roadway alternatives. So it would work, it would just look different.
I'll just say it out loud, everybody can see it, but remind electric utilities that we've been paying undergrounding fees for years, exclamation point. Okay. Another comment from Jill. There are no right-of-way funds expected, right?
Correct. Currently, the next process is once we have a preferred alternative, which would include expected costs for acquisition and right-of-way. Depending on those costs, right-of-way funding would either come separately, and Brooke or Russ, chime in if I'm misspeaking, would come separately if they are significant costs. For example, if they include relocation costs. Those often are funded separately ahead of the project. If they're minor costs, drainage easements, slope easements, etc., those are normally funded with the project. But Jill, you are correct. There are currently no design or right-of-way or construction fundings.
Okay.
And I don't know if I answered that correctly because you asked if they're expected, and I answered as whether or not they're currently available. So please let me know if I did not answer that correctly.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess I just want to reiterate that this is a time to, okay, one more thing from Jill. So to get the biggest bang for our buck, we would not move the utility pole and reduce the right-of-way needs. Okay.
That is correct. That's why we had a variety of alternatives that we want to present something that meets the criteria that the municipality of Anchorage has worked hard to establish for the development of roadways within the area, or within the municipality. And so we didn't want to ignore those because they have been developed for a purpose and a reason. And so we presented those. Of course, every project is unique with its own unique challenges. This one happens to have right-of-way constraints as well as transmission poles. So that is why we did look at alternatives that impacted various things. Everything to how can we actually save a very expensive relocation of an apartment building, or how can we save very expensive relocation of transmission lines? So yes.
Okay. So I guess I want to say now that in addition to asking questions about what you've seen, I just want to be clear that this is also your opportunity to say if you like or don't like something. So, you know, just like you would if you were at, you know, in a room with us during a public meeting. So we also want to hear that too. We also want to hear what you think about what you've seen today. And if there's nothing, that's okay too. I just want to let you know that we're here to listen to as well as answer questions. Okay.
Hi, this is Sherry Billings. I don't think the roundabouts, my personal opinion is that the roundabouts aren't necessary. So could you just clarify why you think they are?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, good question, because this would not have necessarily been a roadway in which our first intersection alternative was a roundabout. It seems like a pretty minor intersection. However, because of the constraints, the roundabout actually gave us the best flexibility in, let me move to that slide, in moving the intersection is truly what we're looking at with this one, is moving the intersection. The associated traffic volumes do not say put a roundabout here, but the other factors of this project, the parcels, the properties, the transmission pole, the fact that on the northeast corner we actually have, I wouldn't call it undeveloped in the sense that it is being used by Aquarian Charter School, but it's undeveloped in the sense that nobody lives there. Nobody's home is there. Nobody's transmission pole is there. And so the roundabout really came about as a alternative that we could look at to reduce impacts to existing infrastructure and constraints that we had at this intersection.
Did that answer your question, Sherry?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. I know silence is awkward and weird, but I just like to give people time to think about things. So this is where we'd normally be milling about a room.
Eating cookies.
Yeah, that's why we have cookies and snacks.
And hugging each other. Things we can't do now.
Right. Okay. So again, I'm gonna move us along here, but if you think of anything as I move us along, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or chime in. Okay.
Are these going to be posted also on the site, or how do we get to see?
Yeah. So I'll move us along right now. I'm gonna take control.
You're gonna take control back. Okay, I'll mute myself.
Okay. And I think that was your voice, right, Sherry?
Yes. Correct.
Can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
No.
Oh, no, just you.
Okay. There it is. Oh, now we can see Sherry and Jack. Hi.
Yes, and I can see your screen too.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to keep this open because I like to see what's going on. Okay. So all your questions and comments today have been documented, and they're going to be part of the public record for the project like we typically do. Okay. This isn't your last opportunity to talk about this project, obviously. So you can email your future comments and questions to me, and you already have my email address somewhere. And here it is on the screen again. But you can email all future comments and questions. We'll do our best to answer them and respond, okay? The project documents that you saw tonight, they're not on the website yet. They'll be up on the website, I don't know, maybe tomorrow, CRW? Does that seem appropriate, or do you need more time than that? Is tomorrow okay?
I think we can
Yes,
get
our
everything
goal
up
is to have them. Sorry,
Okay.
Matt, go ahead.
I think we can get everything up on the website by tomorrow. It shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, so all the project documents and meeting materials that you've seen tonight will be available. An interesting thing too, I know it was kind of hard to see the pictures of some of the things that we had. I mean, I know you live there, right? But so you see it every day. But there will also be like kind of a self-guided for virtual public meetings, so you can review the alternatives again. So there'll be a lot of information available on the website for you to peruse, and then provide written comments if you want. Yeah, And again, thanks, Barry, for the comment. This meeting chat is also recorded and is part of the meeting record too. So anything you put in the chat is part of the meeting record.
Okay, thank you all.
Does that sound good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
See you.
bye. So any more questions from anyone else, I guess? All right.
Holly,
Yeah.
this is Representative Drummond. Can you send us that, the link in an email?
Yes.
I looked at the email for the reminder of the meeting and it isn't in there.
No, it is not. We will send out another email to the whole listserv again after this meeting that kind of says, thanks for coming. Here's all the documents that you saw. So
Okay, great.
you'll get that in the next couple of days. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Okay. With that, I think we're good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Go enjoy the sunshine.
We're going to try.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.